Okay,
we can start. Welcome, good afternoon. My name is Sophia Sushitsky. I'm the director of the Wannsee Center for Europe and Eurasia, and I'm very happy to host today's event, a lecture meeting with the artists and also the curator of this exhibit, and also to invite you all to visit the very powerful exhibition, Guardian Passage. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to say also that in a few weeks, we will be hosting our next events will be a panel discussing recent and forthcoming elections in Europe, discussing the elections in Spain, what was it? In Spain, Slovakia, Poland, okay, and the Netherlands. So I invite you to come. These elections are very important, actually, also for the war in Ukraine. There's no question that governments are unequal or uneven in their support of Ukraine in the war. And so it's very important that we understand what is going on in these different societies. So we're very proud at WCEE to host the exhibit Guardian Passage as part of the College of Literature, Arts and Sciences, Arts and Resistance initiative this semester. The exhibit is also presented in association with the University Musical Society. We're thrilled to have both artists with us today in person and virtually. I will start with introducing Irina Bondarenko, who is a Ukrainian-born and Ann Arbor-based ceramic artist. Her work was featured in over a dozen national shows, including the Sant'Angelo National Ceramic Competition, the Strictly Functional Pottery National Show, and the regional biennial juried sculpture exhibition at the Marshall Fredericks Sculpture Museum. Wow, for a non-English speaker, that's a mouthful for me. She's also an accomplished biostatistician working here at the University of Michigan with countless publications. Our virtual guest, very real, but coming to us through Zoom, is Katya Lysova, an artist, designer, and art historian. Born in Kyiv, she's a graduate of the Mikhailo Boychuk Kyiv State Academy of Decorative Applied Arts and Design, and she's also a member of the National Academy of Cultural and Artistic Leaders. Lysova is also the art director of the Ukrainian Unofficial Research Project, which compiles archives of Ukrainian unofficial art of the second half of the 20th century. Her own art, and I hope you've had the chance to visit the exhibit, and there will be an opportunity after the lectures also, mixes textile and digital graphics. Today's panel will be moderated by Grace Mahoney, who's a PhD candidate in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures here at the University of Michigan. Grace is a literary translator and editor of the Lost Horse Press Contemporary Ukrainian Poetry Series. She's a graduate of the certificate program in museum studies at the University of Michigan, and she serves as the graduate fellow for exhibits at the Institute for Research on Women and Gender. Working with Irina, she's a project manager for Guardian Passage. So I will leave the floor to you to manage this event, and please join me in welcoming the artists and Grace very well. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon and evening. My name is Grace Mahoney, and I have the pleasure of just briefly introducing the main topics of this beautiful exhibition to you, and then I'm going to hand it off to the artists very quickly so they can share their work with you. In Guardian Passage, the power of Ukrainian cultural memory in the face of war, artists Irina Bondarenko and Katya Lysova employ the tools and imagery of traditional Ukrainian art forms to face down the existential threat brought about by Russia's war on Ukraine. Their work in ceramics
photo collage, and embroidery also involves the cultural objects of motanka dolls, ruchnik cloths, poetic and musical traditions, archival photographs, and more. We see how these artists reach to the past, to the strength and comfort of tradition to bring the concepts of guardianship and resilience to their projects that are occupied with the turmoil of the present war. But I also invite us to consider how this exhibition is oriented to the future. More than a salve or a healing meditation in these works, with each etch in wet clay, every pull of needle and thread through fabric, Irina and Katya were thinking of you, the audience, building a connection, weaving a red thread, a heartstring that would bind us as witnesses and allies to Ukraine as it fights for survival in this unjust war. So tonight we will hear from the artists. Genevieve already did my work for me and read their bios, so that's taken care of. They will give us presentations of their work, and afterwards we will have time for a Q&A. Then we will invite you to join us in the gallery space to view the art. Refreshments will be available, but we ask that you consume them outside the gallery space. So with that, I invite Irina Bondarenko to share her presentation.
Thank you for kind introductions. Thank you. And I want to thank the International Institute Gallery and the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia for giving us a space for our work to meet and to be shared with you. It's really special. Do I move this slide? Okay. So this exhibition wouldn't be possible without generous support of your UVM Art Initiative and Arts and Resistance Semester, and Chris and my own department Biostat support. I thank them for giving us all the effort they provided and funding it. Thank you. I'd like to thank my family and friends for your endless support and standing with me. So, what is our exhibition about? To me, in this exhibition, we explored the power of Ukrainian cultural memory. This power is embodied by the red thread that's present in Katya's work and in my work. This thread is akin to Ariadne's thread that took Perseus from labyrinths to the light. And we may trace our roots to different backgrounds, to different continents. But as humans, we draw strength from our roots. When we face crisis, a breaking moment in our life, we go back, we have something to hold on, a straw, a thread. And sometimes it's an old photograph, sometimes it's a memory of a song, sometimes a glimpse of childhood memory. For Ukrainian people facing genocide and brutality of the war, this thread embodies Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian history, and Ukrainian language. As we all know, memory cannot be taken for granted, especially generational memory. I grew up in Kiev in Soviet times. We had very few Ukrainian schools. Ukrainian was taught as a foreign language 2 times a week, 1 hour twice a week. The history was Russified, and Ukrainian culture was presented as a folk culture. That's all. We did know our beginnings. And in 20th century, millions of Ukrainians were starved to death in the worst artificial famine in Europe. The name of this famine is Holodomor. And Ukrainian writers and poets and artists were persecuted and killed. This didn't start with the Soviet Union. When Russian colonization of Ukraine started in 17th century, and they came up with brilliant idea, ethnic imperial idea, that Ukraine is not really a country, that Ukrainian language is not a language, and Ukrainian culture just doesn't exist, or part of the great Russian culture. And nevertheless, it should be banned, it should be diminished. Don't you see a paradox? So even the whole name of the Russian Empire was appropriated from the name of ancient Kiev Rus state. Before Russia became an empire, it was a kingdom of Moscovia. So, but yet, despite all this, despite all the centuries, you can see it wasn't a successful campaign, because this thread, our cultural memory, is a real thing. It comes in many vibrant colors. The tapestry of Ukrainian culture has many different voices. They're telling stories. Katya and I invite you to listen to the stories. So my story is about Guardian Passage. So it's this exhibition, it's sort of a war child. So I don't think it would happen without events that started on February 2022. I have been living here for 25 years, but when last year February happened, it split my life into before and now, and this now continues. The beginning of the war was brutal. My cousins were we all know that the beginning of the war was brutal for everyone. On my personal scheme, my cousins were taken hostage. And after going through the months of trying to help them, I started to volunteer and be on call with Ukrainian defenders, volunteers, civilians. I took a leave of absence of my work. I stopped making art. And I was losing touch with the reality of life here. And I want to thank my friends from Claywork Studio. Some of them are here who kind of sensed it and pulled me in. And I think coming back working with clay saved me some sanity. So, but you know, like 5 or 6 months from the beginning of the war, I still couldn't bring myself to do any figurative work. That was a very important part of my practice. Because there is something for me into drawings, graffiti, into clay. It allows me to be a child. It allows this all imperfection because it's not paper, it's clay, and it gave me a lot of joy. But I couldn't bring myself to do anything figurative. And then I've heard a Japanese American artist, Shoko Teriyama, talking about her experience after Fukushima disaster and how the deities from Japanese culture flown into her surfaces. And I thought, if she can do it, maybe there is a way for me to do it. And without too much thinking, I had a tile in front of me, a concave tile, you know, sort of like a very shallow boat shape that I started to decorate. And I draw Motonka, and Motonka is a guardian doll in Ukrainian culture, and it looks like this. It's a very soft toy, if you want. It's made from recycled textiles that remain in the family, and it's made without needles or scissors. And one characteristic feature of this doll that it doesn't have a face. It has a head, but it doesn't have facial features. It either has an empty space or two ribbons riding down and across. And that's what I draw. And on the other side, you know, like I'm a ceramicist, I'm a potter. I do a lot of functional work. And the back side of the vessel, sometimes it's more important, like equally important as what you see at the first side. Like the whole tradition of tea bowls, you look at the fit of the bowl. So I thought, what can I do with this? And Sgraffito just engraved a poem that it was running in my head. And it was just Vasil Stus' poem. So there are a few stanzas that made it to the back of the style in Ukrainian. Ти вже не згинеш, ти двожилова, земля рабована віками. І не скорить тебе душителям, Сибірами і соловками. Ти ще вибілюєшся болем, ти ще роздерта на шматки, но вже крута і непокірна. Ти випросталася до болі, ти гнівом виросла. Тепер не маєш від нього спокою. Тобі ж рости й рости, покуди не упадуть тюремні двері. І радісним, буремним криком спадають з неба блискавиці. Тарасові провісні птиці слова шугають над Дніпром. So, and I put it aside and the tile and look at this next day. And I recognize in the image of Motanka that I drew something else that was very familiar to me. I am from Kiev, and every time when I come home, I go inside of the Sophia's Cathedral, and there is an ancient mosaic, 11th centuries old, and it's 6 meters high. It's a huge mosaic. I like it very much, and it's called Aranta of Kiev. And with this gesture, it's like Byzantine way of depicting the Virgin Mary. It gives the protection. And there is a legend that while she is on the walls of Sophia's Cathedral, the Kiev will be saved. So I thought it's interesting because I didn't think about that image. So it's kind of like, if you want, if this red thread that kind of came through without me too much thinking about. So I have to talk a little bit about who was Vasil Stus. I know many of Ukrainians know about it, despite all efforts to dig his name down to the ground. He was one of the best poets of 20th century. I truly believe it. He spent 13 years in Gulag camps. He was killed in the year when he was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature. So I hope you will remember this name, you know, and if it pop up somewhere, you will know who is this person. So, and language is Ukrainian language was suppressed during pretty much for 3 centuries. There were times in Tsar Russia when publishing or performing in Ukrainian was forbidden. And even writing in Ukrainian is an act of, and still is an act of resistance. But the same Ukrainian language is a guardian for Ukrainian people. So that's how it started. And reflecting on the events of war became a necessity for me. So that was my way to reflect, feel stronger, and have the sense of protection through this work. It's interesting that the names of Ukrainian cities and villages that I learned since for the last 20 months, I never heard about. And I learned about them because of the destruction that happened there, bombardment or war crimes, you name it. And I was thinking about the image of Motonka kind of in the ruins all the time, and I had the drawing in my head and in sketches. But when I've seen this poem of that's called Karta Trevog, a distress map by Katerina Mikhailitsina, I feel immediate connection with this. And so there is a stanza from it, the beginning. Name me any city, and I can tell you where it's wounded. The same kind of wound that exists on the skin, open and bloody, unhealed. I have the whole map of them, eternal, unacknowledged. So reflecting on the events, I was reflecting with the styles on events of the war and on the stories, and I was reflecting on the poems that I read in social media, because poets, as all arts, responded to the war very strongly, and people were publishing online, publishing on social media. And there are a number of poets that write from the front lines. One of them is Pavlovich Baba, and he was an activist before the war. He was a poet, a performer, you name it. Like if to read the whole list who he is, it will take half of this page. And so this poem is called My Generation, Moje Pokolenie. And I was thinking about thousands of young people, the age of my sons, and their will to defend the country. And it's kind of decorative tile in terms of it's a pattern, but I see this multitude of faces, and that's what it's about. And I, again, like the last line of this poem, reflect to the Ukrainian language. It says, if you like us are reading this out loud, full of joy, relentless, and in Ukrainian, this means only one thing: our dignity wasn't crushed. So it was translated by Oksana Rosenblum. So the number of tiles grow and grow, and I began to understand that they're more than just my way to cope. They want to be serious, and they started to think how to arrange them in a space. And initially I thought about guardian wall, but then it came up rather like a passage, a safe passage. And they started to call it guardian passage. So I'm standing here alone, but in a way, this project wouldn't happen without number of people who contributed to this. Translators who helped to translate poets, readers who recorded the poems in both languages, and wonderful app that was created by Juan Jose Arzak. And I encourage you to scan the QR code at the gallery. You will be able to listen and read all poems in both languages and know the story of each poem. So, and it wouldn't happen without efforts of Grace, who translated to English a number of poems and who contributed numerous hours of her time to realize this project. Thank you, Grace. And again, like arts and resistance, you know, support is just something that allowed to realize. So this is like, I had not all of these styles are equally dark. So I had fun with some of them. This is one good example of the style. So it's a curse. The poem is it's a curse. All of it in English, you can see it. It's written by Arkady Shtipin. And what the image alludes to, there are two things. It's a Ukrainian drone attack on Kremlin, when it caused a lot of scare, you know. And the second thing, it's 10 plagues that were sent to Egypt by God, according to Jewish tradition. And in Seder, there is a tradition to have a drop of wine on the Seder plate for each plague. So this is their kind of merge of it all together. And because I'm from Kiev, I couldn't miss an opportunity to have a witch on the tile. So, and Grace translated it very, with a lot of humor, and I really like this translation, and I think it was a challenging piece, because how do you translate a curse? So, and this, I want to end with this style, and it talks to me, it connects to a poem of Alexander Averbuch, and it's about learning for me. Many people who live in, many Ukrainians who live in diaspora, we are learning for Ukraine, we are learning for our home. And even it's dangerous. And I want to play the recording in English translation made by Graham Atkin.
He wasn't there alone. He wasn't there alone. He was drawn to his own. They stood on the other side of the river, barely touching the soil, and pointed with slow gestures in the direction of the isthmus. Cross it. Like the muted noise of the rainfall lulled to sleep inside one's heart, memories kept to the stream. Muddied, it ran, following fish entangled to the great land, guiltily turning back to glimpse the foggy banks of Idar. The reeds, their tops filled with umber sorrow, dully struck one another, sprinkling tightened down over the water, like the past you must shed, shuck off somehow, over your own self, like apples that refuse to roll away from the tree no matter how hard you kick them, like the primal name still compelling you to turn when it's called out, come here, pick it up. Yet here you remain standing, a wild apple tree, reaching with its last living root for the abyss that is its home.
Thank you. So, move this recording in the app that's on the gallery. Can you do the next slide? So I want to announce upcoming panel with the poet and two translators. So we plan to have it in November 9th. So please stay tuned. And I want just to tell briefly how I heard about Katya's work, and how when I was applying, when I started to apply for this grant, I thought, I want to have a Ukrainian artist in the show with me. It was very important. And I immediately thought about Katya's work. I've seen her work starting from April of 22 on social media. And it immediately, the tragedy and the drama and vibrancy of her works entered my heart and never left. So when I thought about who can I bring, I thought about Katya and her work. I'm so happy that her work can be seen here in the States. So I would like to give a mic to Katya, and please, Katya, can you hear us?
Yes, hello. Nice to be here virtual, and many words was said by Irina about deepest of our history and culture, and I want to tell you about Ukrainian art in nowadays, Ukrainian cultural life during the war. It is hard to image this, how people could live during the war, but I'm now in Kiev, and I live and work, and I'm happy that I'm in this land, and I have opportunity to work in my land. So I want to show my presentation. I'm sorry for my English. It's not fluent and even not very well, but I will try to explain my point of view and my idea. So, 1 minute. The war has been going on in Ukraine for 20 months. We continue to live in the struggle for our state, land, history, and culture. Thanks to the support of the European Union and the United States of America, Ukrainians got the opportunity to tell the world about their identity, art, music, literature, which have now turned into a powerful weapon in the information war. It seems that in the first months of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there was going to be a collapse in culture and artistic space. Then was horrible battle for Kiev. The biggest wave of immigration took place. Women and children evacuated en masse to other countries. Families moved to the west of Ukraine, where it was safer. Only in the first months of the war, 3.6 million people left Ukraine. The world's attention was focused on the events in Ukraine, about which few people knew anything. Then the reactionary art of the poster became the most appropriate and necessary. It was the art of apt expression about events. From the first days of the full-scale invasion of Russian troops into Ukraine, many artists made the choice to act, to talk here and now about the war without distance. The visual images created by them became the voices of resistance at public events in the cities of Ukraine and the world, received resonance in the mass media, and were reposted by thousands on social networks. Here you can see one of the most popular posters which appeared in the beginning of Ukrainian war. It was maybe April or May. So this is posters by Tanya Yakunova, Oleg Grishenko, Dasha Podoltseva, Alexander Grechov, Albina Yelasa, and Nastya Gaidenko. The first large art exhibition in Ukraine since the beginning of the war were the wartime posters at the Ukrainian House in Kiev, which opened in July 2022. More than 100 works by 38 Ukrainian artists were presented at the exhibition. After visiting this exhibition in Ukrainian House, the British researcher Daud Sarhadi-Williams later wrote the book Ukrainian at War, Street Art, Posters and Poetry, where he presented the theme of war and resistance in public space in Ukraine. At the end of 2022, one of the most powerful Ukrainian charitable foundation, Comeback Alive, published a table calendar of 2023 in sticker book format. Each page is an image by one of 47 Ukrainian artists and designers who, through visual work stories, create a retrospective of their emotional state during the war year. The exhibition Wartime Posters became a basis for the appearance of the international project Ukrainian Wartime Posters, initiated by the Ukrainian art group Beruchi. Within of this project, exhibitions of Ukrainian posters took place in the USA, Europe, and Great Britain. Among them were exhibition in New York, Colorado, Los Angeles, Reading in United Kingdom, and Berlin in Germany. A number of Ukrainian street exhibitions on city lights took place in the center of Zaporizhia, which was constantly under missile attacks from the Russians. Within this project was present in my personal exhibition. My way as an artist during the war began in the spring of 2022. On March 1st, my daughter and I evacuated from Kiev. Fear for the child's life forced me to leave home. We went to my cousin who lives near by London. There appeared four digital series. I only had a laptop with me and a lot of time that I didn't want to waste. For many years, I studied Ukrainian art of 20th century, and during my students' years, I studied folk culture, in particular as textile traditions, and all the colors I made a mix of those images that became the personification of the significant past and scary present. In June of 2022, I finished a series of digital collages, The Power of Memory, which consisted of 16 works. Each of them tells about the tragedies of various cities and towns that suffered during the war. Among them, Mariupol, Irpin, Borodyanka, Skоворodynivka, Kharkiv, Odessa, Kiev, and Chernihiv. Each work is created from fragments of photographs, both those that chronicle the invasion of Russian troops into Ukraine and archival photographs of Ukrainians who lived in regions where hostilities took place or ongoing. These elements are stitched with ornamental motifs from traditional rushniki, ritual textiles. Some of these works depict rushniks, potent symbolic cultural objects that accompany a person from birth to death. Rushnik is a textile product, an element of Ukrainian folk ritual culture, which accompanied a person in the most important moments of life: birth, baptism, wedding, funeral. Rushniks were created from a rectangular piece of linen or hemp cloth and decorated with embroidered woven compositions, the content of which depended on its attributed purpose. In the folk culture, each ethnographic region had its own system of embroidery science, its own rushnik style, the formation of which was differently influenced by history. Often the decoration of rushniks turned into a kind of message, and their essence depended on the events with which their creation was connected. One way or another, this subject has always had connection with both personal history and the category of cultural memory. At first, this series was printed like posters, presented at many exhibitions and protest actions. Later, I remade the compositions as textiles using hand embroidery techniques. In the current exhibition, Guardian Passage, I present 8 works from this series. From the Ruins. The work From the Ruins is dedicated to Borodyanka, which was liberated by the Ukrainian army in early April 2022. Borodyanka is the most destroyed city of the Kiev region, which the Russians turned into ruins. The city was bombarded with the high explosive aerial bombs. The target of the occupiers was purely the civilian population because there was no military facility in the city. The collage composition is formed from fragments of a photograph of one of the Borodyanka houses that was destroyed in March 2022, and the photograph from the beginning of the 20th century, which depicts an elegant Ukrainian woman in traditional dress. Another work, Birds. The collage composition Birds is a combination of fragments of a photograph of a house in the Shevchenkiv district of Kiev, destroyed by Russian missile strike on April 28 in 2022, and photograph from the 1930s, which capture a married couple from the eastern part of Ukraine. Above the figures is a drawing of a bird, typical element of Ukrainian folk embroidery. In the lower part, there is a digital image that decorated the edges of an old Ukrainian rushnik, the image of which became the basis of the overall composition. Evacuation. On February 25, 2022, at 4 o'clock in the morning, as a result of Russian missile strikes, a high-rise building on Koshitsa Street is one of the most densely populated residential areas of Kiev, called Poznyaki, was destroyed. It was the first residential building that was damaged by the Russian invaders in the capital of Ukraine. In the following days, the mass evacuation of the population from the central and eastern regions of Ukraine began. The college evacuation uses photos of the above-mentioned destroyed house and an old Selene photo of Ukrainian children from the middle Dnipro region, central Ukraine. The children are surrounded by the embroidered rushnik flowers in the middle of a large hand that ladles them up. Below is a fragment of an old lacy white curtain with the image of house. The composition of the work is an allusion to the plot of the souls of the writers in the hand of God, which is found in the icons of the final judgment, a depiction of the end of the world. Rushniko of Borodyanka. Through the close of Rushnik, a ruin of war, we catch a glimpse of the Ukrainian genius who became a symbol of the national struggle, the poet and artist Taras Shevchenko. The monument of Shevchenko in the village of Borodyanka near Kiev has become iconic for Ukrainians. The photo with the mutilated but surviving monument of the Bard Kobzar against the background of residential building burned by Russians, shelling spread all over the world. Tree of Shelter and Hope. Both works are dedicated to Mariupol and the terrible events that accompanied the battle for Azovstal. The defense of the city lasted 86 days, 82 of which were completely surrounded by enemy forces. In April 2022, the Russians destroyed 90% of Mariupol's infrastructure. Tens of thousands of Mariupol residents were deported to the occupied territory of the Donetsk region. About 1,000 local residents hide on the territory of the Azovstal plant, where the Ukrainian military was based also. The road to Irpin. A cemetery of civilian vehicles burned during the Russian offensive in the city of Irpin. A fragment of a picture from the beginning of the 20th century, which depicts a young mother with her two children from the Kiev region, with outlines of the Tree of Life, a traditional element of Ukrainian folk art. These components form a kind of allusion to the traditional composition of a rushnik trimmed in white lace with birds set against a black background. Its basis is the memory of the people emerging through the smoky ruins of war. Irpin became one of the first areas of the front where ordinary Ukrainians stopped the enemy's army, and the city's residents were among those who suffered from the atrocities of the occupiers. Russians shot evacuation vehicles trying to leave the city, destroyed residential buildings, and killed civilians. And last work from this exhibition is called I Will Stay at Home. For many Ukrainians, leaving home became a difficult ordeal. Many people, despite the risk or to their lives, were unable to make the decisions to evacuate. Staying at home, they continued to work in the conditions of war. Hope was the only thing that helped them hold on. I Will Stay at Home concludes the Power of Memory series and is dedicated to Chernihiv region, is northeastern Ukraine. The occupation of this region began on February 24, 2022, with the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The collage used fragments of photographs of Russian bombed houses in Chernihiv and picture taken in 1893 in the Chernihiv province, which depicts a girl in traditional folk clothing embroidering a rushnik. The composition is completely by embroidered ruchnik flowers sprouting through the ruins. Today, culture and art life in Ukraine is gaining intensity, especially in such large cities as Kiev and Lviv. We don't have the opportunity to look at the museum collections that were evacuated during the war, but our museums periodically open exhibitions of modern artists who work with topics relevant to Ukrainians. We go to the movies, theaters, galleries, donate to the Ukrainian army, help those who suffered during the war, and continue to live in the conditions of the war, the images and meanings of which have taken their place in art, music, and literature. So this is the end of my presentation, and I want to say thank you for this project and for this opportunity, which gives me a chance to talk about Ukraine, to talk about events in Ukraine, and to show my art. Thank you, Irina, and thank you all who made this project.
Maybe also Irina. I think we can take questions from the audience for 10-15 minutes before we begin the reception. Do we have a mic? No, okay.
No, we don't.
Okay, so if you have a question, just please raise your hand and stand up and project, and then if it's a question for Katya or for both artists, we can repeat it to her, and then we'll also translate it to Ukrainian for her. So, yes, please.
I have a question to both of you. I want to ask you what you think joins kind of. I see something besides the red thread that joins your projects, and that joins not only your two projects, but also joins them with poetry of Vasil Stus. And so just please, maybe you have your, I would like to hear what you think, if you see this, the connection. Thank you. I can translate to Katya. Катя, будь ласка, скажіть, які у вас, що, на вашу думку, пов'язує ваші проекти і пов'язує ці проекти з поезією Василя Стуса? На вашу думку.
So I think I can try to answer first. And I think, so as I said, when I've seen Katya's work, it resonated with me so strongly. I know that there is for me a connection with this artist. And not conceptual, just on a very visual level. I really like her work, you know, conceptual as well. But I know that visually it I really connected with this. I just hope that when I offer it to Katya, she will see some connection to, and that will work. So this is, I think, this is one connection on the visual level, plus we both reflected on the war. And I think regarding your question about Stus, I think it's the intensity that brings this work and work of Vasil and poems of Vasil Stus together, because poetry of Vasil Stus is very concentrated. At the same time, he invented a very special thing. He was inventing words all the time, and I think it's done sort of intentionally, because you pause, trying to disentangle and understand it. So it's a very smart tool, because you have very intense poetry and something that makes you to stop and kind of just feel it, because there is no, it's like these words that he invented, they don't exist. You cannot logically process them. You just basically feel them. So I think that's it. I don't know, Katya, if you have, якщо ти можеш щось сказати.
I will try to say, but I will say in Ukrainian, and I ask you to translate, okay? Василь Стус – один з найвизначніших поетів і громадських діячів України другої половини ХХ століття. Він, як і Алла Горська, дисидентка, яку вбила радянська влада в 1970 році, досліджував українську культуру, і саме вони з Аллою Горською свого часу відкрили поховання у Биківні. Там були розстріляні представники українського відродження. Ну, тобто ця інтелігенція у 37-му році, українське відродження, поети, художники були розстріляні у Биківнянському лісі. Через цей факт їх переслідували дуже активно, Горську вбили, ну і зрештою Стуса теж вбили. І для них українська культура, українська традиційна культура, народна культура, вона була дуже значуща. А в українській народній культурі є свої коди, є свої такі візуальні коди. І оце сполучення чорного та червоного для України, воно дуже традиційне, типове. І навіть Стус у своїх поезіях дуже часто використовував цю візуальну складову. Навіть на пам'ять про Аллу Горську, коли її вбили, він написав вірш, який починався так: «Ярій, душа, ярій, а не ридай. У білій стужі сонце України, а ти шукай червону тінь калини. На чорних водах тіні її шукай, де жбенька нас, малесенька шепта, лише для молитов і сподівання». Ну, далі я вірш не буду продовжувати, але це саме трагічне поєднання червоного з чорним, воно є крізь в українській візуальній культурі, як традиційній, так і сучасній, як в поезії, музиці, ну і, звісно, що і в живописі і так далі. Тому для мене оце поєднання червоне з чорним, ну, це те, що, не знаю, є традиційним і знаходить своє місце і в творчості Стуса, і багатьох інших художників.
Дякую, Катя. I will do my best to translate. So, Stus was one of the very important poets of the 20th century. Besides being a poet, he did a lot of work trying to, he was very true to himself, and he was recovering, he was doing social work, if it applied to the Soviet Union setting, right? So he worked, Vasil Stus and his friend and artist Alla Horska, so they recovered bodies of people in, bodies of people in the place called Bikivnya that were tortured and killed. So, and after that they were persecuted. Alla Horska was killed, and for her funeral, Vasil Stus read a poem, memory. This poem is presented in my ceramic installation, and I invite you to read it. But I like what Katya said. It's very visual, because he goes, I don't have translation in front of me, but it's very colorful. He goes from the white winter, and then he goes like, but go and search for red kalina berries in the darkness of the font. You know, if you can play it, it would be great.
Load it up right now.
Yes.
On the app.
Yes. We go to English. So we can play in English from the app, Katya.
Memory of A.H. Erupt, my soul. Erupt, instead of weeping. A bitter cold envelops the Ukrainian sun. Go on, look for the shadow of a rowan tree on darkened waters. Search for it where we are few, the tiniest of sects of those who pray and hope. We are doomed to die too early, since rowan blood is solid, tart, like the blood in our veins. In the howling whirlwind, scarlet drops of pain that fell into the depths will swell into immortal catastrophe.
So, and thank you, Grace. And Katya said that like this color scheme, black and red, it's very important for Ukrainian embroidery, for Ukrainian visual art. It kind of resonated through the century, and Sto's bringing this color scheme, black and white and red, in his poem. This is the connection.
Yes, Barbara.
It was great to see this work together this way. The thing that really struck me, and I have a question, is the way you present your art, so that what's in front and the forefront is the humanity, the female figures, the Jinki in front, and then in the background, the destruction. And I think about something I've always thought about, Ukraine being a matriarchy, but I'm wondering, was that a purposeful thing, or is that just intuitive inside you, just to use your art in that way?
Katya, should I translate?
Yes, I need to translate, please.
Okay. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
So Barbara's question is about like when she looks at it, коли вона дивиться на твої роботи.
Sorry.
Вона бачить, що на першому плані є ця гуманістична ідея, і це ідея жінки, яка, незважаючи на руїни, на все, що відбувається, вона на першому плані. І Барбара питає, чи це інтуїтивна робота, чи це сталося, чи ти концептуально придумувала це?
Ну, чесно кажучи, все, що відбувалося у перші 2 місяці війни, було суто на емоційному якомусь такому тлі. Це була суто емоція, і це була просто фіксація. Тобто ці колажі, насправді, це фіксація, ну, не фіксація, це колажі ці зроблені з світлин реальних подій, світлин реальних людей, світлин реальних об'єктів. Тобто практично основна частина цих колажів – це просто фіксація того, що ми є, ми були і ми зараз живемо в такому стані. Я була, ну просто мій стан був такий, що я залишилася сама з донькою, ну тобто я жінка. І, напевно, це моє якесь усвідомлення того, що зараз дуже важлива роль лежить не тільки в Україні, не тільки на чоловіках, які пішли захищати Україну, але й на жінці, яка має робити все для того, щоб зберегти і боротися за культуру, за країну. Десь так. Так, щоб це було концептуально продумано заздалегідь, ні. Ця вся серія була дуже емоційною, дуже такою на підсвідомому рівні створена.
Дякую. So, the whole series was reflection on the first months of war, to what was happening, and images that spilled to canvas, that are on the canvas, were just sometimes almost a way to say, here we are, we exist. They're us, we are here, we exist. And regarding the female side, answering your question, Katya said that she was alone with her daughter in the first months of war. Katya's husband is independent. He's in the army. So Katya was with her daughter. And for her, it was the world that she was living in. It was a very, the world was a female world, you and the child. That's basically, and she was coming from it. It wasn't conceptual art. The conceptual part, not she didn't think about it like as a conceptual artist. She was just reflecting on what's happening around her. For me, I didn't think about it conceptually. As I said, when I started to draw Motonka, like it was just a pass from somebody who did who draw primitive figures of protection from Japanese tradition, and it was a prompt, and I responded to this. And then as I was doing it, I was discovering, and for me, it's like with my graffiti work. When it's graffiti, it's always a discovery. It's not really planned. It's sort of semi-conscious drawing what I'm doing. It's just I let it flow. Sometimes I have some plan, but it was important. I think when I look back at it, it was important that this is this feminine part in it, because I think, as Barbara said, that Ukrainian culture is a lot of female. You said matriarchat culture. So it's probably kind of just spilled in my work. But there are Motonkas as defenders. There are, like you can see the images there. Some of them are soldiers, some of them are males, but it's all originated from this protective power, because we don't have protective power, aren't we? Yes.
I have a question, actually, for each one of you. So I'll take you first. We got to let Miss Nisova have a rest. All right. When you design those ceramics that we see in the next room, they have that peculiar ovoid boat shape. And maybe I missed this, but why did you select that particular shape for those ceramics and that particular way of hanging them? I've never seen ceramics displayed with those strings like that before. And I especially like the one that shows the explosion on the Kerch Bridge, by the way.
That exposed
The Kerch Bridge.
Yeah.
Bridge.
Yeah, yes. Thank you for your question about the shape. So it was the shape, the first tile that I did, I made the tile in this shade on a mold. But I liked it because I thought about boat. I thought about like the Kiev, this boat, Kiev stands on a river, in a very wide river. And the boat is very important part of it. Like stories related to when Kiev Rus was baptized, there is a boat, and I call them boats, for me they're boats. But the shape is very interesting, because I've heard people calling them leaves. People referring them as they said they remind them, especially because the back of it's kind of decorated not only with words. For some people, there is allusion to the Christ wound, or an eye. So it's very interesting what I discovered doing this, that it's a very special shape that we reason as humans, we have different ways to resonate to. And Grace found a very good, I remember when Kherson Oblast was flooded, right? When the Dnipro was flooded. So it was Grace came up with this, you text me and said, they're like life saving boats for people, these pieces. So it's it's a shape that work for us as humans. So and about hanging them, so this shape requires specific way of hanging, I thought about hanging them in a different way initially, like flat wall, but it didn't work. And then I started to work with them as a passage, and I just experimented, and I tried it. And I think it worked.
May I do to Miss Nisova now?
Катя,
Yes.
до тебе питання.
Так, yes.
The work that you have entitled, I Will Stay Home, in the gallery. When I first looked at that, I did not realize it was a young woman. I thought it was a babusya, a grandmother, an old lady. And I looked at it again, so I was sure. But then it occurred to me that this was grandmother Ukraine. The Russians speak frequently of Mother Russia. I saw a shrine to her outside Kharkiv once. But there would be no Mother Russia had there not been a grandmother Ukraine, right? They'd forget their heritage. And I wonder if you have thought about doing a collage with that theme.
So, Катя, це питання про роботу «Ми залишимось вдома». І спочатку було враження, що ця робота, там не молода жінка, як насправді є, а стара жінка зображена. І одна інтерпретація, яку, можливо, можна запропонувати, що якщо Росія зве себе, я не знаю, як це, мамою, що вона то Київ і Україна – це grandma, бабуся. And so що коріння слав'янської, коріння цивілізації слав'янської в Україні. I'm trying to, so you ask, чи було у тебе, чи є в тебе інтерес, зацікавленість зробити роботу, щоб показати ієрархію історії стосовно України і Росії? Що Україна, що Київ набагато старше місто, ніж Москва, ну, I'm freely translating. I apologize for this, but I try to convey just.
Ну, звісно, що амбіції зробити щось таке, якусь роботу, яка дасть глядачеві зрозуміти, що українська культура старша, ніж там російська, звісно, що вони є, але це дуже абстрактно. Говорячи про, власне, цю роботу, яка була фінальною в серії «Я залишусь вдома», я думала лише про тих людей, які, незважаючи на ризики для свого життя, залишаються в місцях небезпечних для життя. І таких людей, повірте, в Україні дуже багато. Дуже багато людей, які не можуть покинути свою домівку. Ну, навіть не уявляють собі цього. Звісно, що серед таких людей дуже багато літніх людей, але й молодь теж є. Ми зараз живемо з донькою в Києві. Київ – захищене місто, але мій чоловік, який воює на Сході, він є свідком того, що є дуже багато сімей, які не хочуть залишати свої домівки. І це велика, я навіть не знаю, це просто внутрішня проблема, що людина не може, чи проблема, чи не проблема, просто це факт того, що, незважаючи на ризики для свого життя, людина хапається за свою землю, за свою культуру, за те місце, де вона має бути. Ну і, власне, цьому була присвячена ця робота, а те, що здається, що там молода жінка, насправді стара, це просто стереотипи, мені здається, що ми просто звикли до того, що вишивають, отак в такій позі сидять літні люди, але у кінці 19 століття, це фотографія кінця 19 століття, вишивали всі жінки, і молоді, і літні. Тому це просто така, глядач може рефлексувати, може сприймати по-своєму ці роботи.
So, thank you. Дякую. So it would be a good idea to kind of to do conceptual work on the theme that you've suggested about this kind of the hierarchy of the states in the Slavic lands. But this work It reflects when Katya did this work, she was for her it was a work about people who stay home. Sometimes there are some old people among them, and there are some young people. And Katya made decision to come back to Kyiv with her daughter, and there are many people like this. And because connection with the land is very important to people, and it gives them strength, it gives them it empowers them even despite the war. It's many people made this decision. And and she said that like in the photograph is from 19th сторіччя, так, Катя?
Так, кінець 19
From 19th century, and the woman is showing doing embroidery, and at that time all women knew how to embroider, and old women, young women, and this is something that Ukrainian women do.
Well, thank you so much. I think we'll bring the Q&A session to a close, but of course, Irina is here. We'll take it into the reception, but let's give a big round of applause and thank you to Katya.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Катя, я не знаю, чи ти бачиш, тут повна кімната людей. Я хочу, щоб
Я
ти
не бачу.
тому що ти бачиш тільки нас.
Okay,
Can we
just a
show-
second, yeah.
Yeah, we will try to show the room.
Okay.
Oh.
Do this. There we go.